Moin, ihr wunderbare Menschen des Interwebs. Ich begrüße euch ganz herzlich zurück zu meinem Let's Play von The Great Ace-Attorney Chronicles. Wir sind hier stehen geblieben bei Dr. Sithes Aussage, The Waxwork Plot. Und da werden wir uns das Ganze jetzt einmal anhören. It all began at the scene when I saw the waxwork and the note tucked inside its jacket. The actual body of the victim, as indicated in the note's instructions, was beneath the experimentation stage. The body had to be arranged in certain ways to implicate the defendant, which was my job. I enlisted the help of the entire forensic investigation team to dress the scene appropriately. The truth about the execution 10 years ago is a state secret of the highest level. I had to protect it. So I was right. The stage and the machine were all specially designed for the deception. So it seems, and all meticulously prepared. You did well to see through it. You're a very shrewd boy. So kind of you to say. Oder heißt das Shrewd? Ich glaube Shrewd war das was. And what about this autopsy report then? All I did was record the location of the body as being in the crystal tower instead of under the stage. That's all. That's a terrible corruption. Only my team were aware of the deceit, and then only under my explicit instructions. Nobody else at Scotland Yard knew anything about it, I assure you. We must be thankful for small mercies, I suppose. Well, I believe the testimony has clarified everything. There's no particular need for a cross-examination, I would say. No, I disagree. I can't shake the feeling that something's wrong. Just look at that expression on Dr. Sithes' face. It's the defense's right to cross-examine any witness following testimony. What is it about you Japanese that makes you all so dodgily persistent? Very well. If you so desire, counsel, proceed with the cross-examination. Yes, my lord. Okay. It all began at the scene... yeah. The actual body of the victim, as indicated, yeah. The body had to be arranged in certain ways to implicate the defendant. When you say arranged, I presume you mean with this? Yes, the instructions in the engineer's note said something along the lines of fabricate some evidence to make it clear that hairbrain alone could have killed Esmond. So, you mean that was your doing? I fetched Hairbrain's ridiculous screwdriver from the stage and took it with me, alone, to the abyss under the stage where the birdcage had fallen. Alone, Doctor? I didn't feel it would be appropriate to involve anybody else in a particular part of the deception. There was a void under the stage where I found the birdcage lying in the dirt. I approached it, leaned down, and slowly opened it up. Then, I took the screwdriver in both hands and plunged it into the man's chest. And then you noted that in your fake autopsy report as a fictitious cause of death. Exactly. So, the actual cause of death was the trauma resulting from the 30-foot drop. My word. What is it, Mr. Zato? About Dr. Sithes' last statement. It's playing on my mind, that's all. Yes, mine too. Dr. Sithe. There's really no need to shout. I can hear you perfectly well. The defense called for you to add what you just said to your formal testimony. Which part? What what I want her to supplement her testimony with is the real cause of death, what she did to the victim. What she did to the victim. Das ist wichtiger, glaube ich, für mich. How you stabbed Mr. Esman in the chest, that part. Fine, if that's what you want, but there's really no need to point. The prosecution concurs. Very well. You will supplement your testimony now, witness. If you wish, my lord. Okay. I stood over the victim's corpse where it lay in the double cage and plunged a screwdriver into the chest. Okay. Und das widerspricht doch. Dem hier, oder nicht? Oder bin ich jetzt doof hier? Okay, nee, passt. Ich war mir jetzt schon... Warte, das passt doch. Und habe nur darauf gewartet, dass ich eine Klatsche kriege. I've got a nasty feeling that this inconsistency points to an extremely uncomfortable truth. What on earth is the matter, counsel? Have you lost your tongue? I apologize, my lord. Dr. Sithe, in that last statement of yours, there's just one point that seems to defy explanation. Out with it, my learned friend. There's an obvious inconsistency between your description and this photograph, which shows the victim in the birdcage following the events that led to his death. The court has already examined that photograph in depth. There's nothing new we can learn from it. Yes, we have already considered it, that's true. But we now know the facts to be different. What do you mean? I believe we should let the defense explain. Where in this photograph would we see the alleged inconsistency with the witness's statement? The bloodstain. Look closely at the bloodstain on the victim's chest. It clearly extends in a downwards direction towards the man's feet. And why is that significant, counsel? If the victim was stabbed moments before the kinesis machine was set in motion, that's entirely expected. Of course, no, that's not what happened. Exactly, my lord. Dr. Sithe made it very clear in her testimony just now that the point at which she stole Professor Harebraine's screwdriver and stabbed the victim was after the grand deception was set in motion, when the birdcage had fallen below the stage out of sight. From the shape of it, it's clear that the birdcage would have fallen on its side after the 30-foot drop, and if the victim had really been stabbed whilst inside the birdcage in that position, the blood from the wound would have spread out equally in all directions. For it to have formed the longitudinal appearance we see in the picture is conceivable. Given that the victim's blood seeped vertically downwards from the wound, it must be the case that when you stabbed Mr. Esman, he was standing up. In short, Dr. Sithe, your latest testimony was a total fabrication. I knew it. I was right. Now I have identified the contradiction. There's only one way to explain the facts. We have all been under a great misapprehension here. What sort of misapprehension? Dr. Sithe, you claim you were your seed into helping Mr. Drebber as a result of the note he left in the waxwork. You claim that you made changes to the scene of the crime to implicate the defendant, and you claim that you authored a fake autopsy report to cover your tracks. But one of those claims is an out-and-out lie, because the question of what the bloodstain really tells us has only one possible answer. If that is the case, what is it, man? Counsel, you've clearly struck upon a revelation. Now tell the court what it is. Which part of Dr. Scythe's story is shown to be a lie by the contradiction in her testimony? How she was the stabbing of the victim, the autopsy report. The stabbing of the victim. The answer is very simple if you consider the sequence of events. If, when the victim was stabbed, the blood from the wound seeped downwards as it did, we can be sure that the victim must have been either sitting or standing upright at the time. But as you rightly pointed out, the birdcage would have fallen on its side when it fell beneath the stage. Yes, it would, which tells us that the victim must have been in that position of his own accord. That's impossible. The man was dead, remember? No, that is the misapprehension. When the birdcage fell from the stage into the void below, it must have hit the ground with considerable force. But Mr. Esmond didn't die in the fall. He probably lost consciousness for a while, but when he came round, he got to his feet to climb out of the cage. Just as Dr. Scythe appeared. If the victim was in fact alive at that point in time, it changes everything. Mr. Audie Asman's killer wasn't the defendant, Professor Albert Harebrain, nor was it the mastermind behind the stage trickery, Mr. Enoch Drebber. It was you, Dr. Courtney Scythe. Can this possibly be true? Have you been taking me for a fool? It was you, was it? You killed him. You hoped that by admitting to being an accomplice in Mr. Drebber's scheme, the trial would end, before you were accused of a far worse crime. Cold-blooded murder. Oh, do shut up! You're so desperate now, you're making all this up, as if I would do something like that. I assure you, the defense is not desperate, Doctor. Mr. Naruhodo has established the facts using evidence and logic alone. Logic? Don't make me laugh. Sadly, your logic has a gabbing hole in it. What do you mean? I have thought it was obvious. A motive, boy. You're lacking a motive. What possible reason would I have to kill Mr. Asman? Asman was involved in any number of criminal activities, from extortion to theft to murder, but there is no known connection to Dr. Scythe there. I'm rather relieved to say it does seem somewhat far-fetched. True, there's no obvious motive, but there's still something in the back of my mind. I feel sure I've seen something somewhere that hints at why the coroner might have done this. Yes, I might have tampered with the crime scene and concocted a fake report, but murdering someone for no reason is a very different story. Now, when you question what possible reason you could have for wanting to kill Mr. Asman, something did come to mind. What was it, Counsel? Enlighten the court at once. Yes, we saw it yesterday, didn't we? Something that seemed strange, but we had no reason to suspect it at the time. There's a particular object that explains why Dr. Scythe would have wanted to kill Mr. Asman. Die Iron Mask? Scalpels, a Screwdriver. Scalpels? Wohl kaum. Es kann nur die Iron Mask sein. It's the Iron Mask. You've lost me. Sorry, Mr. Naruhodo, but why the Iron Mask? Okay, Moment. Okay, ja, aber es kann ja nicht der Screwdriver sein. Also die Skapells. Okay, sorry. Sorry. Ach Mann, ich hatte jetzt so eine coole Theorie, aber okay. But what my colleague meant to say was scalpels. Perhaps that makes a little more sense to you. Ah, of course. Did you say scalpels? It would appear that word has struck a chord, Doctor. You've come on out with it. It was yesterday when we visited your laboratory. Look at this big thick book here. It appears to be an accounting ledger. It's a record of the forensic investigation team's spendings, I think.
Ach ja, weil die so viele Skalpelle gekauft haben.
Ah, yeah. It's clear that the team purchases various equipment and supplies on a monthly basis, but, well, one entry seems rather strange. Really? In what way? They're buying 500 scalpels every month. 500 a month? At first I wondered what on earth you could be using that many scalpels for. But actually, I realize now, it's not the scalpels themselves that are significant, it's the money for them, disappearing every month from the department's accounts. Aslan's criminal organization relied heavily on extortion for its funding, tracing the money from the forensic investigation team's account to find out where it was going would be extremely straightforward. Ten years ago, when Mr. Esmond was still a journalist and wrote this article about Mr. Drebber, he may well have stumbled upon information as he was researching the story. Information relating to Dr. Scythe's darkest secret that he would use to rack money from her for the next decade. Her darkest secret? Good lord, you mean... I don't know what happened on the night of that execution 10 years ago, but clearly the opportunity to rid yourself of that menace was too tempting to pass up. So in the end, you weren't oppressed at all, were you? You did it entirely of your own free will. Also sie wurde nicht dazu gezwungen, das zu tun, sondern sie hatte selber ein Motiv, Mr. Esmond umzubringen. You stabbed Mr. Esmond in the heart with all your might. To silence the blackmailer who knew your dark secret forever. You will never understand, none of you. What we've had to keep covered up all these long years. As very little of the machine remains after it was ripped apart by the bomb, the truth of this case can never be properly established unless you speak out. And if you decide not to, it's very possible that Courtney Scythe will escape punishment for her crimes. Please, sir, own up to what you've done, and tell the court the truth about what happened. 10 years ago, you told the truth, and you were robbed of a bright and successful future as a result. I can certainly understand your bitterness and your consternation now. However, this is surely the chance you've been waiting for to sever the hold that fate's had over you all these years. Super high voltage instantaneous kinesis? I mean, really. It's the addle-brained mock scientists that are the worst, you know? They don't recognize the fact that they don't have talent. They can't even get that right. And so they end up chasing impossible dreams, having unbridled faith in their abilities. They go on and on about their wonderful hypothesis, their stupid eyes shining like a little child's. They make me sick. I can't abide their foolishness. Careful, Mr. Drebber. I was particularly pleased with the kinesis machine. It made for quite a show, didn't it? So you admit it? You admit that it was nothing more than a shame made for the purpose of killing the victim? Yes, I admit it. I did it all, in the name of revenge. Revenge for the future that Mr. Esmond's article had debriefed you of 10 years earlier. But the revenge you sought didn't stop at Esmond, did it? Which is where that very particular waxwork comes in. Yes, I see. The condemned convict that you saw rising from the grave in Lowgate Cemetery 10 years ago. If your account of those events was all true, then obviously Scotland Yard couldn't afford to acknowledge what had happened. Even if it meant discrediting a bright young man and crushing any future career he might have had. So your plan required that you abduct that particular waxwork model in order to exact your revenge on Scotland Yard as well, or on Dr. Sithe, to be precise. It was a year ago. By some extraordinary twist of fate, Esmond turned up at my workshop. He didn't remember who I was, of course. He just wanted to employ my services as an engineer. And he happened to have a paper with him. An article on the front page caught my eye, about the coroner who'd handled that bogus autopsy being appointed head of a new forensic team. When I learned that news, my cognitive processes started to deceive the plan. What a horrid tale. Device? He robbed me of my future, so I wanted to use the man's own wiles against him for revenge. And have that rotten Scotland Yard eating out of my hand at the same time. I wanted them all to suffer the same humiliation I'd had to suffer. Your actions against those who'd ruined your future were justified as revenge, at least to yourself. Certainly, no one has the right to destroy another's prospects, especially for purely selfish gain. And yet, in carrying out your plan, you did exactly that to someone else, didn't you? Professor Harebrain's only crime was passion for his hypothesis, but you had no compunction about sacrificing his future to effect your revenge. You knew that he would be forever branded a failure and a fraud. Perhaps life treated you unfairly 10 years ago, and others' misconduct left your life in tatters. But remember this, your own actions resulted in exactly the same thing for another perfectly innocent young man. Lord von Zieg's, what of Dr. Sithe? An immediate warrant for her arrest has been granted, and she's been remanded in custody, my lord. I presume she will face trial in the coming days along with Mr. Drebber. A most regrettable situation indeed. She's made great contributions to her profession over the years. It really is a hard truth to swallow. However, that is a topic for some future occasion. For now, Professor Harebrain. Oh, yes? It seems there was a great deal more to your experiment than you realized. However, I think we can assume now that all the sordid details have been brought to light. This has been a very long and profound trial, but I'm pleased to say you're absolved of all guilt. This whole experience has taught me a very great but painful lesson. This dedicated scientist, this devotee of natural philosophy, I've been selfish and self-centered, and above all, a fool. Professor. I've spent my life thinking of nothing but my research. Misguidedly believing that I could do whatever I set my mind to, despite my lack of talent. And the worst of it is, in the process, I've caused others pain and misery. Others who are far, far greater people than I. No, Professor, that's not true. Don't tar yourself with the same brush as Drebber. What happened was his doing, and his alone. This outcome is his fate, not yours. You're not to blame in any way. Lord von Zieks. And the derision with which he referred to you earlier, calling you fool, talentless even. The man has no idea. To believe in yourself and work your fingers to the bone to realize your dreams, that's laudable, not laughable. No one has the right to deride another for such choices. Thank you, Baruch. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, yes, my lord, it is this court's expectation that you find the defendant not guilty of the charge of which he stands accused. I presume there are no objections? None from me, my lord. Certainly not. This trial has really made me think, but this is the right decision. It's all been proven methodically and rigorously. I have no misgivings whatsoever. What's that? He's done, is he? It's all over? I don't know what's become of the yard these days. I don't recognize the place. Very well. In that case, I hereby pronounce the defendant not guilty. Court is adjourned. It's over. That was some trial.